Good evening and welcome to this conference. What the heck is time? Pretending we can answer one of the oldest, most complex questions ever asked. What is time? My name is Rick Serrano and I am here with the International Kunstverein Luxembourg in this magnificent auditorium of the Bank of Luxembourg. Thank you very much for being here with us tonight. It's very exciting to have you all here once again for another one of our talks. Let me show you very quickly how we are progressing in the year. This is our cultural program for the year 2025. We started in the month of January with the conference All You Need is 10 Cherries. Then we had Frida Kahlo in March, pop art last month. Tonight we have What is Time? Next month, we will come back with the social impacts of artificial intelligence. In September, we will be talking about the Maya. In October, about Master Pablo Picasso. And in November, we will close the year talking about Don Quixote, Miguel de Cervantes. Always on Thursdays, always at 7 p.m. We wait for you. Please make sure you book early because as you see, these events are completely sold out several weeks in advance. So if you want to join us, make sure you send your reservation early on. So let me start by thanking the Bank de Luxembourg, and especially Pierre Alborn, Manon Feider, Aurelia Zancanello, and all the team of events who host us here every month so generously. And let me especially thank Hisham Tuami, who is back there in the operations cabin making this possible. It is a privilege and a gift to work with you, Hisham. Thank you very much for all your support and all your help. Well, everybody, let me remind you, as I always do, that this is an interactive presentation. So we will be throwing questions at you throughout the presentation. Every time you see this red circle with a white question mark, that means there's a question for the audience. Remember, we have nice gifts, really nice gifts tonight. We have 5 gifts for those of you who answer correctly. So be brave, be courageous, and try to answer the question. So this is an interactive presentation. Let me, as always, also start by giving an important disclaimer, and that is about the nature of this presentation. Let me remind you that our presentations are not academic presentations, so they do not have necessarily the academic rigor of what you could find maybe at the university or things like that. Our talks are basically about passion. We are here to share with you the passion that we have for the arts, for culture, for knowledge, and in this particular case, for philosophy. And I really invite you to feel the passion because there is so much passion in trying to answer the question, what the heck is time? That if I manage to transmit to you tonight this energy and this passion for knowledge, for wisdom, for the little pieces of wisdom that we might possibly maybe perhaps get out of here, then we have accomplished our mission, which is again to transmit you our passion of the IKF. Now let me tell you that uh, we invite you to live the passion of philosophy. And the passion of philosophy starts by a very simple thing that we should do, and that is to be courageous and ask ourselves questions. Particularly in this session, we will be asking us many questions, and that is philosophical questions. So be open to asking yourself very, very basic questions. As I sometimes say, we philosophers, the only thing that we philosophers do is ask silly, stupid questions. And it turns out that those questions are in fact revealing the most important things of life. So do get excited, do get passionate, and let's go for the question of what is time. This is just quite a challenge that we are trying to answer here. What the heck is time? Now, let me start by mentioning something that, of course, you know, and that is that human beings have always been concerned with measuring time. So the point of measuring time, understanding how time works, and measuring it and forecasting it has always been important for the subsistence, literally for the subsistence, the survival of human beings. Already from times immemorial, uh, attempts have been made to try and measure time. This is, for example, an image, a fictitious image of Stonehenge, already around the year 3000, 2500 before Christ. People in what is today the UK were trying to explain themselves the passing of time, and they were already trying to predict how the harvest could be, when the weather will change, when something similar to spring, summer, fall, and winter will come. They were already trying to predict and already trying to explain how time passes, and they were trying to measure in their archaic manners the passing of time. If we go, for example, to other places like in India, Hinduism was already dealing with concepts connected to or related to time already in the Rig Veda, some 5,000 years ago. Hinduism is already presenting the question of time, what is time? And they have a different conception of time, as you know, time as something circular, which is very different than our normal way to measure time. Or, for example, in Mesoamerica, the 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 wrongly called Aztec calendar, which in fact dates way back, more than 3,000 years old, and was probably originated more with the Olmecs than of course the Aztecs. The Aztecs come way later, but they were already trying to make very precise attempts to measuring time, and they were concerned with the idea of how can I predict time, how can I predict what will happen, how can I put things and events in the axis of time. They were all these people were already wondering these things, how to measure time. But you know, moreover than understanding how to measure time, they were very concerned as well with understanding time, not only how to measure it, but factually what time is, what is time, right? And already, as we saw last October in our talk about the seven wise men of ancient Greece, they were this is before the pre-Socratic, so this is before the philosophers. The wise men were already concerned about the concept of time. More than 700 years before Christ, they were already making some very brief, as you remember, we have very little information about the wise men, but they were already wondering what time could be. And they were already wondering, how do we relate to time, or how does time relate to us? So these are the very fundamental questions that are very, very old. In the world of Taoism, we might have next year the talk on Taoism that we did a couple of years ago. So the concept of Taoism was already introducing or touching on the matter of time approximately 600 years before Christ. So, these are concepts that are indeed very, very old. Thinking time is a truly complex task, and this is for many reasons a complex time. Just for starters, think of this as the following. We normally understand time as something linear. No? We think of the timeline. In business, for example, we talk about timeline, and normally we put like an arrow, and there's this classical Excel or PowerPoint showing the passing of time and how things happen. But if you think of it, time, the linear time that we use is actually a representation based on a division of a circular or elliptical movement. So, for example, the day is nothing else than the Earth turning around its own axis, so in a circular movement. Or the year is nothing else than the Earth rotating around the sun in an elliptical orbit, right? And time is a division, a linear division of that. So that makes it already complex. Now, I don't know if you have ever stopped and wondered, for example, things like what attempts have been made to measure time with some precision? Because, of course, in the times of the Stonehenge, probably if you miss by a month, that was probably pretty much good. If your estimation of the arrival of winter was wrong by, say, a month or a couple of weeks, that was still tolerable as long as you could more or less determine when the cold weather would arrive. But in reality, the need for precision comes much later. Around the year 1500, the Gregorian calendar became popular, and it was in part distributed around the world thanks to the colonialism of the British Empire. Uh, that is when people around the globe started using more formally a calendar as we know it now, and counting days and months and years the way we count them now. Now, it's important to think of the following. When we try to come to an agreement on when things should happen, no, it is important that we talk about the same time. So when we, for example, are going to meet to go to do something, or where we need to catch a plane or whatever, we need to be able to determine time with a more important level of precision, right? So I don't know if you have ever wondered, for example, what a second is, or how do you determine what a second is? How long is a second, for example? Well, let me just remind you what a second is. A second is actually a series of divisions. It's basically 1 year. So the time that the Earth takes to go around the sun, that is 1 year, and then it gets divided by 365 and a quarter. That's the number of days in a given year. And then that is divided into 24 hours, and that is divided into 60 minutes, and that is divided into 60 seconds. And that is how we know what a second is. Now, one thing is to say, okay, this is the theory, how you would calculate a second, but a very different thing is to materially be able to measure a second, and materially be able to have the same kind of second for you than the same kind of second for me, without variations, right? Now, since when do we need this kind of precision to go, like, for example, to the second? Well, it's actually relatively new. It is estimated that around the year the 1950s, so middle of last century, people started to need more precision. Like, people started to require, not being wrong by a month, of course, is not good anymore. Being wrong by a day is not even good enough. We really need to get to the minute, probably, when, for example, trains start to be needed to be coordinated between different cities. The time a train leaves, the time a train can pass in a place and not being used by a truck, not being used by another train, then you really started to need some precision. So, but the question is, okay, so who determines, if we need precision, of course, how can we determine how long a second is? How can we make sure that what a second is for you is also a second for me? Actually, why am I talking about seconds and not minutes? Well, the simple reason is because you can think of a minute. If you count to 60, then you get to a minute. This is pretty much logical, no? And for example, children at school might count, or when they hide, for example, they count up until 60 and then they go, or whatever. But we cannot count below the second. We're not thinking of thinking below the second. So how can you count to say that a second is a second, right? That becomes even more tricky. So how do we determine what a second is, which is like the smallest understandable unit of time? Well, it turns out that in 1967, the Conference of International Committee for Weights and Measures gathered in their 13th conference. And that is when they said, we need to determine what is going to be the measure for a second. Yeah, clocks, of course, clocks have been around for hundreds of, for thousands of years, literally. I mean, the Babylonians and the Egyptians were already using, for example, sand clocks or water clocks or sun clocks were already used in the ancient times, in the ancient civilizations. But when it comes to precision, this is back to the point of precision, the Committee for Weights and Measures said, okay, we need to find an element that marks time with more precision. Of course, the pendulum was not super precise. Then later on, beginning of last century, quartz appeared, and when quartz clocks appeared, then it got much more precise because quartz is the atoms of quartz are vibrating at a more constant rate, and then a second could be determined with substantially higher precision. But that was yet not enough, and they wanted more and more precision. So what did they do? They basically went into thinking, okay, what should be the precision with which we measure time? And they said, okay, let's look at all the elements in the periodic table of the elements, and let's find what the element is that vibrates more constantly. So the one that would change the least, so that we can make sure that a second for me is the same than a second for you. And they made the selection among all the elements, and the winner was the atom of cesium. The atom of cesium turns out that at least in those years, so we're talking second half of last century. Now apparently this has been superated, but the last information that I have that can be understandable and put in simple terms is cesium as the element that constitutes atomic clocks, what is called atomic clock. The element cesium, vibrates at the rate of 9 billion times, exactly this number, 91926317770. That's the number of times that an atom of cesium vibrates per second. And that number is very, very stable. It turns out that independently of the conditions, an atom of cesium will vibrate exactly at that same rate, basically all the time. And that is why it was selected to measure time. And that is why it was selected to measure specifically the seconds. And from there, the rest of the time is. And all our clocks now turn at the same identical time. If you remember when I was young, I remember that clocks were not given the same identical time, and there were discussions about who had the correct time at the given moment. Right? Today, if we turn to our iPhones, if we turn to our computers, they all display the same identical time, and they turn the minute in the same identical moment for everyone. Okay, you might have a slower internet connection at some point, and that would be delayed. But if you have proper connection, we basically are all using exactly the same time, and that is because there's an atomic clock behind you. Well, this is all only an introduction. This is what I've been talking about all these first minutes. It's just an introduction of how we measure time. But in reality, you're not here so that you hear from me how to measure time, because that's not the real fun, right? Our concern about time goes well beyond measuring time, way beyond how we measure time. The real fun is to ask ourselves, what is time? Not how we measure time, but what is time, right? That is why we're here. And probably beyond that question, even more basically, let me ask you, beyond that question, what is time? If I really get philosophical and I want to answer the question, what is time? What is the next question that I should ask myself? What is a really important philosophical question below the question, what is time? What's the next question I should? Well, the next question I should ask is, does time exist? Because, philosophers, when we start thinking about things and trying to define things, and so we very rapidly come to the question of existence. So not only do I ask what is time, I go further and I ask myself, well, does time exist? And this is not so evident. This is, let me tell you, this is because, maybe time is a complete illusion. Who can assure me that time is not a complete illusion? Because let me tell you, if we talk about time, we're going to talk about, for example, the past and the future. But if you think of it, the past is not here because the past, strictly speaking, has already been. The past has already fallen into the past. And the future is not yet here. The future is yet to come. So when we think of time, can we make sure that it exists, because the past has already passed and the future is not here and not here still. So but even if time exists, even if time exists, the next question is, well, where does it exist? This is not very clear. Now let me remind you, in the conference that we had last year on René Descartes, we talked about Bertrand Russell and the 5-minute paradox. Remember, Bertrand Russell, the famous philosopher of Cambridge last century, he was concerned with what he called the 5-minute paradox, by which he said, actually, you think that things have happened in your past, in your as you were a child and so forth, in a given year, and you came to Luxembourg in the year whatever and so forth. In reality, Russell says you cannot prove that maybe everything is an illusion and somebody has planted in your brain just 5 minutes ago, somebody has planted in your brain the idea that you were born in the year 1969, that you moved to Luxembourg in the year 2019, that you went to university in 1995, and so forth. Maybe all that is crap, and it has only been planted in your brain 5 minutes ago. That's the Bertrand Russell paradox. So this is about the question of time and time being an illusion, right? So bottom line, philosophically, we cannot be that sure that time exists, right? So this is how it gets fascinating. So, but in any case, let's try to think that time does exist. So if time does exist, then what is time? This is what we will be talking about tonight. And how are we going to be talking about this tonight? Well, I bring you bits and pieces, just very simple, tiny bits and pieces of 12 masters that talk about time. Just some bits and pieces. It is by no means an exhaustive explanation. It is by no means an academic explanation. It is by no means a rigorous analysis. It's just, again, some passion about the major masters that have talked about time according to myself. Well, let's go. Aristotle, 384, 322 before Christ, the philosopher Aristotle is going to say many things about time, many interesting, important things about time. He's going to say, first of all, time frames us, time wraps us, time surrounds us. Just like this dancer is there in her classroom and she's spinning, just like that, time frames us. We are surrounded by time. But more than that, time circumscribes us. Time is around us. Notice that when I say time circumscribes us, that means that time sort of defines sort of like a perimeter, right? Okay, so bear with me with that. So time circumscribes us. Just stay with that idea. Now he's going to say, Aristotle's going to say, well, time has something to do with movement. But he's going to clarify, time is not movement, but time has something to do with movement. Just like this dancer moves, and I realize that there is time passing, but is not movement. Now he's going to say, time is something that connects what has happened with what will happen, and in that sense, that time is evolving. Now, time is a connector between a before and an after. You see, the function of connecting the before and the after. Time is the instant. Time is like a vortex. Some things happen in the past, something happened in the future, and time apparently is sort of like a vortex. But time is a line. Time is the line. This is different than a point. So he's saying this is like a vortex, but it's like a line. So that means things happen in a line. So this is more natural to us, right? The concept of the arrow. Now, if you think of this, the question dramatically changes. The question dramatically changes because notice that he says we are subscribed in time. We are circumscribed by time. But then here, another very important philosophical question arises. If I say that I am circumscribed in time, well, we philosophers, we like a lot to talk about prepositions. And when we say that we are in time, then we have a big problem, because what is the meaning of saying that things are in time? What is to be in time? What is the meaning of this thing when I say you are in time? Not on time, but you are in time. You operate in time. You are circumscribed by time. You are surrounded by time. You are in time, like you could be in that ballet classroom. What is to be in time? This is an important philosophical question, because again, philosophers, we toy a lot, we play a lot about prepositions and what they mean. Aristotle is, however, going to make a very important distinction. Watch out. He's going to say, okay, independently of what I have said about time, I need to clarify something. Our soul does not depend on time. Our soul does not depend on time. This is strong. Because a moment ago he had said that we are in time and that we are circumscribed in time, that we are surrounded by time. So how can it be that now that my soul does not depend on time? This is very interesting, right? You know, this presents a very important question, because can we then talk about time? Can we at all name time? Can we express what time is? Well, is time a concept that we can discuss at all? Then it's not clear to me, says Aristotle. It is not that clear, because I struggle to define it. However, what do we know about time? Aristotle is going to say. Well, if anything, what do we know? Let's see. Well, we do know some things. We do know a couple of things, he's going to say. First of all, time is the rector of everything. Time is like this structure is holding that building. Time is the rector of everything. Time orders everything. Time is pre-established. Time precedes us. It was there already when you arrive. And guess what? It will be there when you leave. You know, time is where we are. Time is literally where we move. That is the in of time. That is the preposition in of time. And yet the question remains. The question remains, what is to be in time? What is to be in that classroom? What does this in have to do? Well, anyway, that's Aristotle. I just leave you with those little pieces of good old structural Aristotle, and then let's move to our second master. Our second master is St. Augustine of Hippo, 354, 430. And let me start by asking you to see if somebody can win the first prize. In what book does St. Augustine talk about time? Well, yeah, you got it right, in the Confessions, book 21st. Well, in the book 21st, St. Augustine is going to take it really seriously and really passionate. And he's going to be, it's fascinating reading the book, because it's going to be a delicious dialogue with God. And he's going to ask God, God, help me, please help me understanding what time is. And help me understand why or how should I talk about time. And he says, please, I ask you this on behalf of our Lord Jesus Christ, please do help me and illuminate. And it's fascinating reading the Confessions, because you will see with very simple language, he explains you what he thinks the time is. Let's see. He will take the topic very seriously and discuss it with God. He's going to say in Latin, he says, exarcit animas, inflammatia vehementer, which means my soul is burning. My soul is anxious. I really want to know, I really want to understand what the meaning of time is. And I really ask you, God, to please illuminate my soul and my brain and let me know, let me uncover what time is. Now, he's going to say, can we talk about time? Because I have some difficulties about the narrative of time. Can I talk about it? Because, if we St. Augustine is going to say, if we talk about something connected to time, I understand it. If you tell me that, for example, tomorrow you are coming to my place at 5 p.m., then I can understand that. I can understand perfectly what you're talking about. But if you ask me to define what time is, then I have a struggle. Then I cannot define it. But I do understand everything that you tell me related to time. Even more dramatically, let alone that I can explain it. Let alone that I can explain it. The question here again is, dear God, does it exist? again, is this not just an illusion? Does it exist? Well, St. Augustine is going to say, at least there is something that we can say about time. At least there is something that we can say, and that is that it can be measured. So, if I ask myself whether it exists or not, at least I cannot deny that it can be measured because we measure the days, the years, the months, the time, the seasons, and so forth. So we can measure something, then it should logically exist, right? But I still struggle to define it. But apparently I can measure it. That's already a sort of a victory. Now, St. Augustine is going to say, what is paradoxical here is that we can speak of a long time. Like, for example, you can say, the COVID-19 quarantine was very long, and it was very long. Or, for example, my work day was very long, although it was 8 hours, it was very long. Versus, for example, my holidays were very short, or for example, the weekend passed and it felt very, very short. So he's going to say, how is it that we can speak of a short time or a long time? But what time are we talking about in any case? What time are we talking about? St. Augustine's going to answer. Because, it feels like there are different times here. It feels like there's different natures of time, different tenses of time. Different times are yet connected. So again, we're talking about the past, the present, and the future, but they are connected like this ladder, right? But what time shall we be talking about? What time can we talk about when we say that time does exist? It's not that clear because the past is gone. The future has not arrived yet. So what do we have? What do we have? Well, it seems that what matters is the present. It feels like what matters is the present because the others maybe don't exist. Well, he's going to call this what matters is something that happens in the present, but the present is something that he's going to call distentio, like sort of like opens, something that although it is short because the future is coming and then suddenly becomes in the present, then suddenly falls into the past. But there's just an instant, a moment, a brief moment that it apparently is the present. And he's going to say that moment should distend itself, should sort of elongate itself so that I can grasp it. But the narrative is still difficult. How can I talk about time at all? No? Now he's going to say there is some inner capacity. We do have some inner capacity to understand what it is. Don't ask me to define it, but there is some inner capacity that allows me to talk about it. And he's going to say that is what he calls the intangible character of time. Time has this sort of, I cannot hold it, I cannot grasp it, I cannot get a grip of it. However, there are two concepts that he introduces: memory and awaiting. Memory is what allows me to sort of travel to the past, and awaiting is what allows me to go into the future. Like, for example, when I have a memory of my school years, or when I am awaiting, for example, that the sun comes out in the morning, then I can be waiting for that, right? But in any case, he's going to insist that there's this fleeting character of time. There's the memory and there's the awaiting, but in any case, the time is like fleeting all the time, like going away all the time. He's going to talk about the past is something that he calls in Latin preteritum, and the future is what he calls in Latin futura. And he's going to ask, yeah, what are these guys? I mean, I cannot get a hold of them. What are they? But in any case, he's going to coincide with Aristotle in saying that time encompasses us. Time clearly wraps us. Time is sort of like around us, surrounding us, circumscribing us. But he comes back over and over to this fleeting character of time. This fleeting is like, it's like this fleeting character of time is like fugitive particles. It's like so fragile, fugitive particles that fall into my hand and they go away. He calls it in Latin, fugitivis particulis agitur. Fugitivis particulis agitur. They are particles that go away. I try to grasp them, but they inevitably fall into the past, inevitably. So what matters, he's going to say, what matters, it's not that I can talk about time. It's not that I can describe time. What matters is to feel the flow of time passing by. That is what matters. That's why I brought you this photograph of these old jars or containers that, sometime happened, sometime in the past happened, right? To feel the flow of time passing by, like in the museum. What matters is our weight, our wanting to grasp. So our wanting. So I need to have sort of like an intention. I need to want to to hold time if possible. And that he calls the intentio. That's the intention, the wanting to hold that time. That's going to hold intentio. Now, but he's going to say, okay, our wanting is what matters. Okay, that's important and very clear. What matters is to ask myself for the past and for the future of time. But if I ask myself about the past and the future of time, which, again, the past has passed, the future has not yet arrived, and then there's these particles, but do they exist? And if they do, then if they do exist, this past and the present and the future, then what's the natural next question if I conclude that they do exist? What's the next natural question? This is a very basic question. The next question is, well, where? If they do exist, let's suppose, because I cannot really hold them, but let's suppose that past exists. So let's suppose that future exists. Okay. The next question is, where do they exist? In philosophy, we have these questions. We ask about something. Then the next question is we ask about whether that exists or not. And if we dare to say that it does, then we ask, where does that can possibly exist? So it's this fascinating sequence of questions that you ask yourself. Don't apply this to personal things, please. In any case, somebody was telling me, yeah, you know what? They were talking about infidelity, and they said, "I don't know. Were you unfaithful?" Well, I don't know. I think I cannot prove it. And in any case, where? So they got to the where question. So don't apply this to personal things. Just stay with concepts. Anyway, so I was saying I should ask myself from this form the present. It is the present that matters, is Conceição Santiago saying. Now, I should ask myself about the present, but I should not ask myself from my intellect, from my intelligence, from my brain. I should ask it from my spirit. Of course, he's going to say, I should ask it from my soul. And remember, the guy is talking to God while he writes the book. So it's not a surprise that he's going to say, it is in my soul that I should try to understand the present. So he was saying, remember, he was saying, I need this intention and I need this elongation of time. So, and this needs to happen in my soul. So he's going to call that distentio animi. My soul needs to elongate itself so that I can grasp that present. That's the point of it. That's the elongation of time. I should make this distentio animi to be able to hold time. And he's going to say, ecce distentio es vita mea. That means this distension, this elongation, this grasping the present in an elongated way, that is the proof of my life. That is the proof of life. That is my life. That is where I live. That is this in that we were looking for in Aristotle. It is in that moment that I live, in that elongation of the present time that I live. So time is like a concatenated series of moments. Time is like a concatenated series of elements, links. We have the past, we have the present, we have the future. Yeah. For the past, we have the memory. For the future, we have the expectation. And in the middle, we have the distension. We have the distension and the distentio animi. That is what is going to show us what the present is. Which one matters the most? He's going to say. Which one of these three matters the most? Well, can we grasp it at all? Can we hold it? He's going to say, ego in tempora dissilui. That means I dilute myself, sort of. Allow me the translation. I dilute myself in time. I need to be able to exist, to be able to grasp, I need to dilute myself, like to open, like to elongate myself so that I can grasp those fugitive particles. Anyway, that's enough for good old intentional St. Augustine. Let's move now to our third thinker, and that's going to be Isaac Newton. 1643, 1727, we move very quickly to the future. So Isaac Newton is going to say several very interesting things. Isaac Newton is going to say, first of all, folks, time is not depending on the individual. So stop the crap. Time is not depending on the individual. Time is the same for everyone. And guess what? It is linear. It is linear, he's going to say. It's very clear. No Rig Veda, no nothing. Time is linear. He's going to say time happens on a kind of perfectly rigid, unchanging state. So we start here with rigidity. Time is here, doesn't change. That's what I brought you this photograph of the tombs. Time is going to happen, and time is not going to be in a changing state. He's going to say space and time, two concepts that will be taken on later by Einstein. Space and time are absolutes, and that has a lot of consequences. Time is universal, which means time is the same for everyone. And what is the consequence? The consequence of the fact that time is universal and the consequence of the fact that time is the same for everyone? Well, the consequence is that time ticks away at a constant rate. This is clear. Time ticks away at a constant rate, according to Newton. He's going to say time passes equally for everyone. Notice how different this is from what Augustine was saying. For Newton, time passes equally for everyone. You don't need to agree. I'm just saying what Newton said. Now, Newton's times is probably the one for which we are most tuned, more like a program, this concept of linear time and so forth. But anyway, just some ideas of Newton. That's enough for now from good old gravitational Newton. Now let's move to our fourth thinker of the night, Gottfried Leibniz, who was always in competition with Newton. They both claim to have invented calculus, for example. They had different views in many things, similar in others. What is Leibniz going to say about time? Well, he's going to start us out very drastically by saying time is relational. So, if time is relational, then I probably care. It's not that time is going to be all over me and really putting me down. Time is relationship, so I should have a role to play. Now, time is a measure of change, which is debatable, of course, because what if nothing changes? Is time passing? Well, of course, time is passing, but for him, time is a measure of change. Time, however, he's going to say, does not exist on its own. Attention. So somebody said, what happened if in the world there were nobody at all? If there were no human beings on Earth, will time exist? It's not clear. Well, Leibniz is going to say something similar when he says time does not exist on its own. So time is not fully independent of me, according to Leibniz. So I do play a role. Okay, just to stay with this idea, that's enough for now for good old relational Leibniz. Let's pass now to Immanuel Kant. And now we're getting serious. 1724, 1804, Immanuel Kant, the famous German philosopher, the disciplined famous philosopher who lived in Königsberg in Germany and who every day passed in front of the square at the exact same time, and people were said to tune their clocks according to the moment he went for his walk because he was so precise. Well, let me start by asking you, in what book does he talk about time? You got it right, in the Critique of the Pure Reason, 1781. So what are some of the concepts introduced by Kant talking about time? Well, some of the concepts are time as an objective framework, independent of me. So Leibniz, go to hell. Time is an objective framework completely independent of me. You can sit there or you can do whatever you want. Time is independent of you. Time is no consequence of anything. Time is not the result of anything. Time simply is. This is Kant. Time simply is. Do not wonder, do not make strange philosophical questions, guys. Time is. Time is for Kant what he calls a synthetic a priori knowledge, something that does not require an explanation, does not require a demonstration, something that exists before everything else, something that exists independently of other phenomena and of other factors. As such, time precedes me. The party was already going on when I arrived. And guess what? The party will go on when I leave, right? As such, time is a precondition. Time is a precondition. When I get to the empty apartment, the parquet is already there. Time is already a precondition. Now he's going to ask, okay, but what is the nature of time? What can we say about the nature of time? He's going to say something very strong things. Let's see. He's going to say, first of all, there is one and only one time. So don't come with stories that your time and my time and no. Kant is going to say no time. There is only one time and only one. First important thing. Second important thing. This time is infinite and has no limits. So it's infinite and has no limits, which means that time does not start nor does it end in any given point. So time, as a consequence, was not created. You know, St. Augustine was asking himself, and he was asking God directly, God, can you tell me what were you doing before you invented time? Because for St. Augustine, of course, time was invented at a given moment. But Kant is going to say, no cap. Time does not start, nor does it end in any point. Time is infinite and is independent of you and me. More importantly, time is linear. This has been said before, like Newton, but for the first time, he's going to say time is irreversible. Time is irreversible. So no Back to the Future. Time is irreversible, right? Time is a priori condition of all phenomena, So whatever you can think of, whatever you can name, whatever you can imagine, everything has time as a priori condition. Just like these nails on the photograph in this exhibition in the museum. Time is already there nailing you down. Everything is subordinated to time. Absolutely everything is subordinated to the axis of time. Obviously and evidently, I am subordinated by time. I am subordinated to time. Time is absolutely bigger than me. However, he's going to concede something. Time can only be perceived as a function of other things. So again, and this is a little bit similar to St. Augustine, I cannot understand time that easily. I cannot understand time in abstract terms. I need to think of time as a function of other things so that it makes sense, so that I relate to it. And about the nature of time, he's going to say there are different characteristics that time has, but some of them are, for example, there is this thing called permanence. So even if time is flowing, some things can have some permanence. Some things and some events can have succession. So some things happen before others and some things happen after others. But there's also the possibility of simultaneity. So you can be doing something and I can be doing something else, and both things can coexist in time. That's okay, despite of time being only one, and despite of time being the only one for everyone. Now he's going to say something additional. He's going to say, okay, even if time is independent of me, even if time is this vector that is completely objective and a priori synthetic knowledge, he's going to say, there is this concept of self-affection. I get affected, I get touched by time, I get wet by time, I get like almost like infected by time, right? And this opens the door to some sort of connection of me and time. So yes, time is totally independent. And yes, I am subordinated to time, but this self-affection, well, that means that there is something about me and time, right? So this is like, in time for Kant is a little bit like a theater. So the theater is there, the theater is all set, but we do play on stage. We do play on stage. Huh? Very well. Well, enough for good old discipline Kant. Let's move now to our next thinker, Edmund Husserl, 1859-1938. We're approaching our times. Edmund Husserl, father of the phenomenology. He's going to make radical affirmations about time. Radical affirmations. Very interesting. Listen, take a listen. He's going to say, first of all, folks, time is an experiential component. Time is about an intimate consciousness. This is not alone. This is not by itself. This is not completely independent. And I cannot disagree more with Kant's proposal of time is period. No, time as an experiential component, time as an intimate consciousness. What matters is how you experience time. What matters is how I live time. The time that matters is not independent of us. The time that matters is totally connected to me. The time that matters is not outside of us. No, the time that matters is inside of me. This is the importance of my apprehensions of time. What my consciousness perceives. Feelings matter. For the first time, feelings matter. He's going to, as a good philosopher and as a good German philosopher, he's going to invent all these words, typical of the philosophers, especially the German ones and the Greek ones as well. So he's going to say there's this thing called Zeitobjekt. Zeitobjekt. The Zeitobjekt, what is a Zeitobjekt? Zeitobjekt is the time that I feel. It's the time that is like a thing for me. Like if you were to give me a big clock and how I relate to that time, the time that I feel, this is the Zeitobjekt. Now, apropos the discussion started by St. Augustine of the future that comes and passes quickly through the present like particles and goes into the past, he's going to say, yeah, that's all good, that's all good. But we need to make an important clarification. That passage from the future to the present to the past, that passage is a soft passage. It's like it falls into the past, yes, but the falling is a continuous, soft, like a liquid, like a flow, something that falls into the past, but not drastically. It's not a broken falling. It's not a rupture. It's not a broken falling. It's a soft falling. And he's going to say something. Because what matters here is you and time, he says, we do have this thing called inneres Bewusstsein, the internal conscience. We are conscious of time. And he's going to call that Zeitbewusst. We are Zeitbewusst. We are conscious of time. It's not that time exists independently. No, totally the opposite. We are conscious of time, and this is very important. Now, how do we become conscious of time? He's going to say, because we need to do something that he calls the Ausschaltung. That means I turn off the lights, like I turn off the lights and all the circuits. I need to take a break to realize, to shut down and stop for a moment and realize, oh, I am in time. I am in time, and my life and my existence is connected to time. This is the so-called Ausschaltung of Husserl. He's going to be preoccupied with the Jetztpunkt, the point, the now point. So again, the discussion, the past, the present, the future. He's going to say what matters is the Jetztpunkt, the time now, like a drop of water that falls and makes the sound. That's exactly what matters. Now he's going to say, I'm going to introduce two concepts, retention and rememory. These are two key concepts in Husserl. Retention. What is retention? Well, he's going to say retention is, for example, like a sound. Like, for example, if I make a clap, you hear the sound, that sound passes and it's finished, it's gone. But you can retain it for a moment. Well, that is retention. And the other concept is rememory. Rememory is like, for example, when you find the lyrics of an old song that you liked a lot, but you have not listened to that song for many, many years, and you suddenly start listening to it again, and your brain and your memory and your heart a bit are remembering that song. Well, that's like the anticipation of what's going to happen. He says that's like the rememory is like the tail of a comet that passes. There's this comet with a lot of light, of course, but then the tail it stays there for a while. That's the memory. That's the way you can sort of travel in time thanks to that memory. He's going to say the importance of now is relevant, but not the instant of now, not the instant of time. The importance of now is like, he's going to call it, very similar to St. Augustine, a longitudinal intentionality. So it is like an elongated intentionality. There's again this concept of intention. So the is, the was, and the will be, they don't imply a negative change. They don't imply a negative rupture. He's going to say there is this other concept that he invents called the Wiedererinnerung. Wiedererinnerung, literally repetitive memory, or I do remember again and again. This is going to allow us to go to the past and think of time in the past, and to go to the future and think of it. If you can anticipate, for example, if you can anticipate the sunrise even before the sun comes out, you start seeing how the morning gets with more light and more light. You are anticipating that. In any case, the is, the was, and the will be are all time elements that are concatenated. And what matters is the present. He's going to call this the Quellpunkt, the origin point, the point of origin, the point of the source point. Anyway, that's enough for good old experiential Husserl. Now let's move on to our next philosopher called Martin Heidegger, 1889-1976, the most important philosopher of the 20th century, Martin Heidegger. Let me ask you, what book? Exactly, Being and Time, 1927. Well, to talk about Heidegger is really a challenge here. So I'm going to give you a Heidegger 101 minus. It's like super basic Heidegger. Again, as a good German philosopher, he's going to invent concepts and he's going to invent words. Heidegger is not going to talk about human beings or man or woman, nothing like that. He's going to invent a word to describe what we normally understand as human or a man, and that is the Dasein. Dasein is the expression he uses to refer to a person, literally. So, of course, it is composed by the verb to be, sein, and the preposition there. Dasein is like this dancer, she is there. She is there standing. And he's going to say that Dasein is not Dasein in abstract. No, it's the Dasein in the world, in der Welt. He's going to say the Dasein, just like this dancer, is not just a dancer in vacuum. No, she's a dancer in a theater, and she's dancing in a theater. She's connected with the theater. You can even see her shadow projecting on the floor. Amazing what AI can do. All the images, by the way, in this video are created with AI. So you can see how the dancer, the Dasein, is connected to the world, like Heidegger said. Now, the Dasein is very important to clarify something. The Dasein is there in the world, but, however, let me tell you, he's going to say something very important. Dasein is there in the world, but stop for a moment and think that nobody asked you whether you wanted to be there. So nobody asked you whether you wanted to be on stage. Nobody asked your opinion whether you wanted to exist, right? He's going to say, you have been thrown into the stage. You have been geworfen sein. Du bist geworfen. No? You have been thrown on the stage. Like this dancer has suddenly been thrown to say. The noun in German that he's going to create is Geworfenheit. You have been thrown to the stage. Nobody has asked you. Now, why is all this relevant? Why is all this relevant? Because what is time for Heidegger with this concept of Dasein in the world and you have been thrown into the world? Well, he's going to say, folks, time is a unitary phenomenon. What the heck is it? Time is a unitary phenomenon. Time is a unitary phenomenon of a future which, having been, makes itself present. Let me repeat this. A future which, having been, makes itself present. So for any one of you struggling with verbs conjugation, this is like the nightmare. This is like Becquerel square. Anyway, so this is the way he calls it, the future which, having been, makes itself present. And he's going to introduce another concept which he calls die Zeitlichkeit. the temporality. So he said, let's rather talk about Zeitlichkeit. So, like time, but time like as a noun, like as a descriptive noun. Time as a wholeness that wraps us. So again, this concept that time wraps us, that time is surrounding us. Time as an all-involving wrapping, all involving, nobody gets out, all involving wrapping. Then this wrapping is the fundamental structure of Dasein. And then we arrive to the connection. Then we arrive. It is time. It is precisely time that is wrapping us that becomes the fundamental structure of Dasein. So you are there. It is your theater. It's not that you are just independent. It's not that you're just independent and in the world. No, no, no. You are there, but you have been wrapped by time, and that's the fundamental structure of it. Dasein, as we say, literally there being. And how does this matter? If it does, well, we're back to the original problem. We're back to the original problem. We have three times: the past, the present, and the future. The past, the present, and the future. Now, what is the time that matters? Heidegger is going to ask himself, like just all the other ones. And he's going to say, well, neither the present nor the past. The most important time is the future. For the first time in history, somebody's going to say the time that really matters is the future. Now, why? Why so? He's going to say because of the Sorg, the worries, the concerns, the fear, the anxiety, the angst. The worries, the concerns, the angst of what? Of what? Exactly. Of death. He's going to say the Dasein exists zum Ende. So the human being exists to die. From the moment you are conscious, you realize that you exist and you realize that you will die. Let me put that in the first person, and I invite you to think of it in the first person. From the moment that I become conscious, I know that I exist and I know that I will die. And that generates a hell of an angst. That generates a hell of a concern and a hell of an anxiety. And that is why what matters is not the past, is not the present. What matters is what the heck do I do from the time that I have now until the day that I will give back the equipment. That is the only reason why the future is the only time that can contain the possibilities. Only in the future can I project myself. We should think time from the perspective of future. Worries are the main vehicle to think time, but the time that we should be thinking of is only the future time. Only the future can project the Dasein. Only this time is the one that matters. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, good enough for good old throne Heidegger. Now let's move on to our last thinker, Albert Einstein. Well, our last scientist, actually, Albert Einstein, 1879, 1955. He's going to write the electrodynamics of moving bodies in 1905 with theory of special relativity, and then the foundation of the general theory of relativity in 1916. And he's going to be drastically different than the predecessor, because before him, we all share the same notion that time was a universal parameter. That was before Einstein. But with Einstein, guess what? Hold on. The speed of light, the mass of bodies, and energy play a role. This is not just like we thought it was. Einstein's theory of special relativity is going to explain this. And of course, I do not understand nothing about it, or almost nothing about it. I just bring you some micro headlines of it. But anyway, he's going to say time is not necessarily the same for you and for me. But then you will say, what is new about this? Because Husserl had already said it, and St. Augustine had already said it. So what is new about Einstein when he says time is not necessarily the same for you and me? Well, the big difference is that Einstein is going to say time is not necessarily the same for you and me from a physical perspective. So physically speaking, not emotionally or relationally, not in your heart and in your soul and in your connection to God. No, physically, time can be different from you and from me. And this is the huge thing that he finds. Let me make a very simple example. Imagine that you are looking at the train and the train passes in front of you and you're standing there. You see the train passing. Let's imagine that you are looking at the train and your friend is sitting on the train. And then let's imagine that at a given moment, the pilot of the train turns on two lights, he flashes two lights, one in the front and one in the back of the train. At the same time, same identical time, pushes a button and then the lights come flashing. And then you are outside the train, you're observing the train. And guess what? For you, these two events, so these events, the two flashes, happen at the same time, right? Because they are literally happening at the same time. But for your friend who is sitting inside one of the wagons, guess what? It turns out that it is different because the light in front of her, because she's traveling in that direction, strictly speaking, Einstein's going to say, strictly speaking, that light arrives to her before than the light that comes from the back. So things do not happen at the same time physically. That is the fascinating principle of relativity. No one is wrong. So what time is it really when they happen? One says at the same time, the other says no, that one happened first. Who's right? Well, nobody is right, nobody's wrong. It all depends on the observer. It turns out that every moment could be now for someone and not for you. It turns out that this is what he calls the relativity of simultaneity. And now the concept of space and time get combined into one common entity. Before, we used to think of space, like in three-dimensional space, and time was separate. And for Einstein, he used to say, no, it's all the same thing. The time is the fourth dimension, but it completes them. Now, saying this, then the present moment has no special significance. The past, the present, and the future exist all in the same way, he's going to say. We cannot label one particular time as being more important. Einstein's going to say time and space are modes by which we think and not conditions in which we live. More what we think. So apparently, time depends on the individual, their position, their speed, and space. Time is combined and it works with space. So it's this duality of space time is what matters, not only time, not only space. Now, very importantly, we can move through space in every direction. So I can go left and then I can come back right. I can go upstairs, I can go downstairs. But guess what? In time, no. In time, I only move in one direction. And this is the direction linearly, only forward. Now, the arrow of time, time cannot unfold backwards. This is clear to Einstein. Now we are back to the question: can time be an illusion then? If time can be different for you and time can be different for me physically, then can this be all an illusion? So is good old Bertrand right? Well, what it does appear is that time becomes personal. What it does appear is that the time that elapses for me is entirely dependent on where I am and what am I doing and at what speed am I moving and what my mass is and all those things. So the faster an object moves through space, the slower it moves through time compared to an unmoving observer. Well, this gets very complicated, right? This gets very complicated. Well, I'm going to leave it there. Good enough for good old relative Einstein. Now, let me ask you something else. We could talk for hours about time, and of course, we could elaborate, and we probably should elaborate in each and every one of the philosophers and the scientists that I have just enumerated. But when philosophy and science are not enough, then what do you do? What can you do when philosophy and science are not enough? Who do you invite to the party? Well, you invite the poets, right? We should invite the poets because when philosophy and science are not enough, we should invite the poets, right? You all know that. So let's invite, first of all, good old Dante. So Dante in the Divine Comedy in Paradiso, he's going to say something beautiful. Listen to this. Nel suo profondo vidi che s'interna, legato con amore in un volume, ciò che per l'universo si squaderna, sostanze e accidenti e lor costume, quasi conflati insieme, per tal modo che ciò che io dico è un semplice lume. Let me explain this to you. Dante sees all time and space united in a single instant, held together by, guess who? The divine love. So God. Of course, we are in paradise. What is scattered across the universe and across time is now gathered into one eternal vision. Isn't it fascinating? Like pages of a book, all elements, all events, so past, present, future, our three protagonists of the night, are now visible at once, not in sequence. Time is no longer linear. What Dante sees is not complex or chaotic, because in God's eternity, everything is one, simple. Everything is the whole. Isn't it marvelous? Let me read you another fragment. Colui che volse il sesto allo stremo del mondo e dentro ad esso distinse tanto culto e manifesto non può aver lo nostro mal in odio. What is the meaning of this? Dante refers to God as the divine architect who created space and time, setting the boundaries of the universe. God sees both what is visible, so the present, and what is hidden, the future and the deeper truth, or the past. For God, time is not linear. Everything is present to him at once. Isn't it great? So that's our first poet. Now let me bring Goethe with Faust in 1790. Wer dich zum Augenblicke sagen, verweile doch, du bist so schön. Dann magst du mich in Fesseln schlagen, dann will ich gern zugrunde gehen. What is the meaning of this? Well, Faust makes a pact with Mephistopheles. He expresses his longing to capture a perfect moment in time, his beauty. If he ever wishes for time to stop, he is willing to give up his own soul. The human desire to hold out fleeting moments, fleeting particles, fugitive particles, even at the greatest cost. Goethe is also going to say, Die Zeit ist ein großer Lehrer, aber leider tötet sie ihre Schüler. Time is a great teacher, but unfortunately it kills all its pupils. Now let me finish, because we will close the year with Don Quixote. Let me finish with Cervantes, from Don Quixote 1605. El tiempo es corto, las ansias crecen, las esperanzas menguan y con todo esto vivo en deseo de vivir. El tiempo, que suele dar dulces salidas a muchas amargas dificultades, dio remedio y salida a las mías. Paciencia y barajar, que el tiempo lo aclara todo. Tiempo hay de sobra para morirse. Más vale paso que dure que trote que canse. And last but not least, el tiempo descubre la verdad. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure. I will now invite you to join us for the next one, which will be AI social impacts, that will take place here on the 10th of July. And then in September, we will have Mayan Wisdom. I invite you to join us. And with that, let me close the conference. What the heck is time? English version. Thank you very, very much. And I will see you upstairs for the cocktail. Thank you and good evening.